What's up, everybody? Welcome back. MMA DFS picks for DraftKings UFC 274. Oliveira and Gaethje, Namajunas and Esparza. We're here to break it all down for you. The whole card, best bets, picks, lineup advice, strategies, DFS, betting, you name it. We're here. I'm Brian Jester, co-founder at Occupy Fantasy, joined by Jake the Snake, owner of MMADFS.com. Jake, nothing like a 15-fight work week. So how's it going?
Yeah, man, they don't pay extra when they add the additional fights to the card. It was a long one.
I know they do add something to the prize pool though. We got 200K up top this week on DraftKings, which we will happily take a crack at. And if you've accumulated tickets, now's your time to unload them on DraftKings. And again, this video is going to be about 15 minutes long. We're going to break down the two 5-round fights on the card, the two title fights. Well, kind of two title fights now that Oliveira missed weight, and we'll talk about that here shortly. Couple newcomers, pretty rare for a pay-per-view slate, but we do have 3 guys making their debut. Fights that you want to target, some bets you want to make, and then some prize picks. Would you see our promo code here? We're partnered with Prize Picks, and we've been crushing those prop parlays as well. So make sure you use our deposit bonus code. Go get some free money, make those bets, and we'll talk about that towards the end of the show. So, Jake, let's jump into it. Oliveira, Gaethje, Namajunas, and Esparza. 5-rounders, 2 of them, which always makes things difficult for tournaments. Give me the rundown on what historically has happened for 5-round cards and what that means for how we want to try to build lineups.
Yeah, so we've got a decent amount of these, multi 5 round cards now to look back at. And the biggest takeaways, looking at the last 10 of them, are that we've had at least one 5 round fighter in all 10 of those. So, pretty simple. You're going to want at least one of them. You don't have to get too cute and, fade both. And then in 8 of those 10, we've actually had one underdog. So dogs have actually done pretty well in these fights. So, a lot of the field is going to play both favorites. And, it's pretty easy to get away from that and play at least one underdog. So those are kind of the basic principles to kind of leapfrog ahead of the field, I would say, just as like a general rule of thumb on these 2 5 round fight slates.
Okay, easy enough, right? That's the simple lineup construction for tournaments on DraftKings. Real quick, let's talk about low risk contests. We talk about fight stacking in the main event on normal size and non pay per view cards when there's only one 5-round fight. And generally, stacking both main events is a good idea on a pay per view card like this. And Jake, that's what I put in our lineup here. So for low risk, you really want to get those 4 fighters in there: Gaethje, Oliveira, Namajunas, and Esparza. Now, when you do this on a normal size card, you only have one favorite, one dog, and you fill it in. But generally, you don't want to get another underdog into this lineup because that 3 underdogs, you're basically guaranteeing 2 losers, which draws really thin towards the end there. So really try to get 2 favorites in, and $8,800 left per fighter. A lot of different ways you can go. I don't think there's a consensus, Jake, on what these last 2 fighters should be.
Yeah, totally, man. I mean, we got a lot of gross plays on this slate, so I think you're going to see a lot of different 2x2s for low risk. And I mean, honestly, I was looking at it. I debated a few different ones. It's hard to say like definitively this is the way to go. I think there's multiple different combinations, and it's what it's going to come down to is getting those 2 right. So it's not my favorite low risk slate, but you still got to play all 4 5 round fighters so that you can play in the end. Just the 2 5 round underdogs and 4 favorites. I mean, it's definitely the way to go.
Absolutely. All right, so let's talk about how each of these fights explode in DFS and how each of these fights fail. So let's start with the Oliveira Gaethje fight. In what way does this fight happen that you have to have a piece in your lineups? And this could be like quick 1-sentence answers, and we can just kind of get a quick glimpse of the ceilings and floors of these fights.
Yeah, if we get an early knockout, as long as it's not like early round 2, I think that the winner is going to score well in that Gaethje Oliveira fight, especially if it's Gaethje that gets the knockout, as the underdog. It's going to be a lot harder for him to get left out if he pulls off the upset. Oliveira, it's a little bit easier for him to get left out. I think like 6 of his last 7 finishes have come in the second and third round, which just inherently is going to score worse than a first round finish. So, I mean, if you're getting submissions in, early round 2, early round 3, lots of ways you can bust there. I don't think he's topped like 97 DraftKings points in his last 6 submissions. So price is the favorite. Pretty easy. He gets outscored. So if Oliveira wins, I would say there's there's a good amount of ways that Oliveira can get left out. Really hard to see Gaethje getting left out if he gets a knockout.
I think that makes sense for sure. And again, we hinted at it at the top of the show. If you saw the live weigh-in stream today, Oliveira did miss weight, could not get it. The belt is vacated once the main event starts. So, and again, we'll never know what this means for why that happened, how he's recovered, how he felt leading up to the weigh-in, how his mentality will be now that the belt will be vacated. So, Jake, I guess it just adds a little more uncertainty to this matchup.
Yeah, man. I mean, how crazy is that? I don't think
Yeah.
that's ever happened before with the main event favorites. I mean, what's his motivation now? I guess my take is he's kind of fighting for the next contender spot. Like, if he loses, they're probably not immediately going to give him another shot for the title. But if he wins, like, all right, well, you don't have the belt any longer, but now we'll give you a shot, maybe against Islam next to win the belt back.
That's what it sounds like to me, at least. I'm not an expert here, but I think that's what it sounds like. Now, for the other matchup, Thug Rose, and Esparza, how does this fight end up in optimal lineups, and how does it get left out?
Yeah, so a little bit similar to the other one we talked about. If Esparza wins, I think she's going to score well, and I think at her underdog price, she's going to end up in the winning lineup. I mean, there's always weird ways, with like one fighter controls the first round, and the other fighter gets an early second round finish, and then underdogs go off. But in general, I would say if Esparza wins, which we're pretty big on her, I think she ends up in the winner. I think there's a lot more ways for Namajunas to get left out just based on her price and based on her recent scoring. If you look at her last few wins, 101 point, 102 points, 63 points. That was in a 3-round decision. But, she only scored like 100 points in her last 5-round decision wins. So at 8,900, she can definitely get left out. And on FanDuel, they made her the most expensive fighter on the slate, which really makes no sense because she's not the biggest favorite. But whatever. They waited till Thursday to release pricing just to make her the most expensive. So great job.
Yeah, makes zero sense. But I will say, right, and this matchup with Esparza, I can't imagine she's looking to wrestle, right? And that's where, especially if this fight goes 5 rounds, that's where Rose can rack up some more DraftKings points. And I think that's especially how she fails for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, even if she does want to wrestle, which she probably won't, she should keep this a striking battle where she'll have the advantage. If we see some back and forth wrestling, that's going to take away from Rose's ceiling. And I think she's going to have a tough time out wrestling Esparza. So I think Namajunas is really she's just the submission threat here, whereas Carla is going to be the wrestling thread. So Rose is probably going to be striking, looking for submissions when she gets taken down. But yeah, I don't think she's going to be doing much offensive wrestling.
At the risk of her now scoring 140 DraftKings points, I think she's probably one of the easiest fades on the card if you're playing tournaments.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm interested to see where the field ends up on it. We don't have her all that high owned, and it's possible she comes in, even a tick lower. But I mean, for a main event favorite being in the 30s, I mean, it's pretty low owned, but I think it's pretty justified as well.
For sure. Absolutely. All right. Now, moving on to some of the lower level fighters on the card. We have 3 fighters making their UFC debut, and we'll start from the most expensive to the least expensive. Jake, just give me a quick synopsis of their background and their fighting style and what we can expect in their debut. The first one is all the way near the top at 9,400, Clayton Rodriguez against CJ Vergara. What about Rodriguez?
Yeah, man, this guy's really impressive. So he's 7-1, coming off a dominant decision on the Contender Series, where even though it went the distance, he just completely owned the fight. Was striking, really, really accurate, which is kind of crazy because he threw in a lot of spinning kicks, flying knees, like low percentage moves, but he was connecting on stuff. Really aggressive striker. He has some grappling skills. The one concern is he's only fought once since 2019, which was that Contender Series fight. It did go 15 minutes, so it's not like one of those fights that ends in 60 seconds and we have no clue about this guy. Like he looked great for the whole fight. Like no cardio concerns. I would say just overall really solid fighter. 5 of his 7 wins have come early, 4 in the first round, 1 in round 2. His only career loss came in a 2015 split decision in his second pro fight. I think this guy's a really interesting prospect moving forward. He's definitely a guy to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. And then moving down to 8,600, we have Fernie Garcia against Journey Newsom. What's the rundown on Fernie?
Yeah, so he's primarily a boxer. He's coming in 10-1, trains out of Fortis MMA with guys like Damon Jackson, Miles Johns. He actually is coming off his first career KO win, which was also on the Contender Series. Normally he's a volume guy, not a ton of power, does a good job of mixing in combinations of punches. So he's a guy that can put up a bunch of striking volume, but unlikely to get many knockouts. He does have a few submission wins on his record, but they all came earlier in his career against kind of suspect competition, I think all with losing records. So, I mean, one thing with this guy is he hasn't fought the toughest competition. Only, I think, 4 of his wins came against guys with winning records. And one of those was like a 45-year-old that took the fight on short notice. So, we don't fully know what we're going to get from him. He starts really fast. He kind of slows down later in fights. He's not a guy that's going to get a third round finish. Like, if he's going to get a finish, it's going to come early, and it's unlikely. So he's really looking to get ahead in striking and then kind of cruise to a decision. But I mean, his best attribute's definitely his hands. And the one concern with him is he gets his leg chewed up all the time by leg strikes. So, I mean, that's something he needs to work on.
Good to know there. And finally, we have Cameron Van Camp, who was expected to make his debut a few months ago. Finally getting back around to it. Fortunately, from a content creation standpoint, Jay, we already had all the work done on Van Camp, which certainly speeds things up a little bit. So, interesting matchup here with Fialho. So, what do you think of Van Camp's chances here?
Yeah, so Van Camp comes in 15-5-1. He had been scheduled to make his debut in September at 155 pounds, where he had fought earlier in his career, but recently he's been at 170, and that's where this fight's going to be. So he's apparently open to fighting at a few different weight classes. 13 of his 15 career wins have come early. He's primarily a grappler. I think he has 9 submissions, 4 knockouts. He's pretty hittable. I would say that's his biggest concern is he's very hittable, and he hasn't faced the toughest competition for the most part. He has fought a few guys with UFC experience. He got submitted by Austin Thud Hubbard back in 2017. He lost a 5-round decision to Bobby Volker, who had some UFC experience. He also got submitted by Thomas Gifford, who I think he was winless in 2 or 3 UFC fights. So he's fought some UFC guys. He's never beaten any of them, but he has fought a few. The concern with him is he's coming off the Kentucky and Tennessee regional scene, and he's looked good against bad competition, but we just don't know what he's going to look like against good competition. But he definitely has the grappling upside, the finishing upside, the up-tempo kind of wild pace that we're looking for in DFS. So I think that he's a guy that you definitely want to target his fights in DFS for sure.
Hasn't faced great competition and has a hittable chin. Not really the best matchup against a power puncher who's fought all around the world in Andre Fialho, but interesting stylistic matchup, I'll give you that. So, all right, let's move on. Jake, if there was one fight on this card that you would say, and this is the ultimate jinx, right? We know what's going to happen when we say this, but one fight that whichever side wins is likely going to end up in optimal lineups. Which fight are you targeting the most in your tournament lineups?
Yeah, so I just touched on it a little bit. I think that's Fialho Van Camp, man. I think Van Camp's going to come in and either look great, unlikely, or look completely terrible and just get immediately clipped by Fialho and get knocked out. I mean, I don't see this fight going very long. Obviously, we're putting the kibosh on it now, but really, really tough to see the winner there not scoring well. I think the only way that fight busts is if Van Camp controls Fialho on the ground for the whole first round, and then Fialho comes out and knocks him out to start round 2.
Sounds about right to me. And we do have a couple more fights that you want to target, so make sure you check out the daily plug at occupyfantasy.com. Jake comes in and writes it every single week with his top plays, lineup strategies, best bets, prize picks plays, construction tips, literally everything you need to break down a card from a DFS and betting perspective. So make sure you go check that out. A couple more of those fights that you want to target are in this plug. And Jake, speaking of prize picks, I know you have a couple plays that you're eyeing and you've been crushing them over there. Remember, you can use promo code OCCUPY. Use our link in the description below to get a 100% deposit match bonus and use these picks. Take some free money, make these bets, and get those prop parlays running with UFC. So, Jake, give me 1, maybe 2 prize picks lines that you think are pretty off.
Yeah, I mean, you might notice a trend here, but I think the Fialho under 7.5 minutes on that fight, I think that's a good one. I'd be surprised if it made it past the middle of the second round. And then another one on the under, which isn't ideal on a pay-per-view slate, but Cerrone under 10 minutes, that fight I think is also going to end in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, lots of geriatric fighting on this card. I know a lot of old UFC, longtime UFC fans are excited for some of the matchups. Obviously, as newer fans, we're not super pumped to see all these 50-year-old fighters fighting. But that Donald Cerrone fight leads us perfectly into our stream parlay of the week, where I take a bet, Jake takes a bet, we put it together for a big stream parlay. And again, we usually take these from either Jake's site, MMADFS.com, or Jake's picks in the plug here. So Jake, speaking of Cerrone, I mean, two guys here, final fight, loser goes to the glue factory, the other loser goes to the retirement home. I gotta say, under 1.5 at plus money with these two guys and their histories, it is an easy bet for me. I think you can get it at plus 120 at DraftKings. So if you have a DraftKings bet you want to pair up with that, I think it makes for a great stream parlay.
Yeah, I think that's a good bet, man. I thought you were going to say winner goes to the glue factory, loser also goes to the glue factory.
I was trying to be nicer because at least the winner can like ride off into the sunset.
It's nice of you. Only one of them gets put down.
Yeah.
That's a fair bet. I like the Esparza money line at plus 185. I think this fight is more or less of a pick 'em. So at plus money, I'm going to take Esparza money line there. So if we parlay those two, that should be about 520 plus 527.
I like that. We will take that for sure. And yeah, as you see, Esparza here on screen is the cover girl of our daily plug this week, which means we're extra confident in her for this slate. So that'll do it for this video. We appreciate you listening. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel to get notified when we go live, upload any new videos. We do these videos every Friday. So make sure you're subscribed, click that button, get the bell notifications. Give us a thumbs up if you appreciate the UFC content. That lets us know to continue to do more of these types of videos. Go follow Jake on Twitter at DFS_MMA and read his work at MMADFS.com as well as OccupyFantasy.com. You can follow me on Twitter at BrianJesterFF. Any further questions you have about this slate, comment on this video below. We'll answer them before the slate locks at 5:30 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. Or if you have more in-depth questions or want to just talk with us, join our Discord server. Click the join button below this video, OccupyFantasy.com/Discord. Come join the community of OccupyFantasy.com members and staff. And it's especially great to sweat the fights with throughout the night. We're in there all night. So come join us there. So that'll do it for Jake. I'm Brian. We appreciate you listening and good luck in UFC 274.